When I was invited to speak before you tonight, I thought long and hard about what story I could tell that would make you believe again in the quiet power of justice, in the resilience of love, and in the strange, poetic ways life balances its scales. What I am about to share is not just a story, it is a journey through betrayal, pain, and redemption. It begins, as so many tragedies do, with a man who thought wealth could buy happiness, and a woman whose love was too pure to be priced. In the glittering city skyline, there stood a mansion whose windows glowed every evening with gold and laughter. It belonged to Richard Halden, a banker whose charm and wealth made him the envy of every man in town. By his side, for almost a decade, stood Emily, his wife, his confidante, his anchor. They were once the couple everyone admired. She had met him when he was nothing more than a dreamer behind a desk, working late to prove himself. Emily had believed in him when no one else did. She had cooked by candlelight, sewn her own dresses, and sold her jewelry so he could afford his first investment. But power changes people. It wraps around the heart like silk, soft at first, until you realize it's strangling everything real. Richard had begun staying late at the office. He said it was meetings. She believed him. She always believed him. Until the perfume that lingered on his suit was not hers, and the laughter that followed him home was not for her. On a rainy evening, she waited at the grand staircase as his car pulled in. He walked through the door, elegant in his tailored suit, his eyes cold and distant. And then, without warning, without a flicker of shame, he said the words that would tear her world apart. "Emily, I think it's time you left. I'm in love with someone else." She stood there, trembling, her hands gripping the rail. "You're joking, aren't you?" she whispered. He shook his head. "No, you'll have what you need. But you can't stay here. Not anymore." Behind him appeared a young woman. Beautiful, proud, and smirking. She couldn't have been older than 22. The mistress. She wore one of Emily's silk robes, the one she used to wear when she'd wait for Richard with tea by the fireplace. That night, the robe belonged to someone else, and the home no longer did. Emily didn't scream. She didn't plead. She simply turned, her tears silent, her face pale with disbelief. She packed one small suitcase, left the diamond necklace on the dressing table, and walked out into the storm. The rain drenched her as she stepped onto the road, her heart breaking not just from betrayal, but from the realization that love had been replaced by pride. She had nowhere to go. Her friends were his friends. Her world had been built around his shadow. She wandered for hours before finally sitting on a park bench, the streetlights flickering above her. Her phone buzzed. A message from her father. "Emily, are you all right? I had a bad dream tonight." She didn't reply. She couldn't. The humiliation burned too deeply. That night, she slept under the cold rain, a wife turned stranger, a woman forgotten by the man she had built a kingdom with. The next morning, she walked to a small cafe near the river, her clothes still damp, her eyes red. She ordered a cup of tea but couldn't bring herself to drink it. And that's when a car pulled up. An old man stepped out. Her father, Mr. Caldwell, a man known for his quiet dignity and sharp mind. Though retired, he was once one of the most respected financiers in the region, a mentor to many, including, ironically, Richard himself. He saw his daughter sitting alone, her shoulders hunched, and his heart broke. He walked up to her slowly. "Emily," he said softly. She turned, and at the sight of him, the tears she had been holding back came rushing out. "He threw me out, Papa," she cried. "He said he loves someone else." Her father listened without a word, his face calm but his eyes cold. When she finished, he placed a hand on hers. "You will not cry anymore," he said. "Do you remember what I taught you about storms?" She nodded faintly. "They pass," she whispered. He smiled gently. "Yes. And sometimes, they wash away what was never meant to stay." That afternoon, the old man went home, but he was not defeated. He made a few calls, reactivated old accounts, and reached out to silent partners who still owed him favors. Because what Richard didn't know was that Mr. Caldwell had once been the silent investor behind the bank that had made Richard rich. He had given him his start years ago when the young banker had nothing but dreams and ambition, and Emily's faith. The next day, Richard walked into his office, whistling. The young mistress was sitting at his desk, spinning in his chair. "Did you sleep well?" She asked playfully. Like a king, he replied. Everything's finally as it should be. But by noon, something changed. The board called an emergency meeting. Whispers filled the room. The shares had dropped, investors were pulling out, and an emergency audit had been launched. Richard stormed into his office, furious. Who authorized this? He demanded. A calm voice answered behind him. I did. He turned, and there stood Mr. Caldwell. The old man, elegant in his gray suit, leaned on his cane and looked at him with eyes that once saw him as a son. Mr. Caldwell, what is this about? Richard stammered. It's about consequences, the older man replied. You built this empire on deceit, not gratitude. And now, it's time to face the truth. Within hours, the truth spread. Mr. Caldwell had bought out controlling shares through quiet channels. The bank that once belonged to Richard now had a new majority owner, Emily's father. Richard was stunned. The mistress, realizing what was happening, packed her bags before sunset and left without a word. Pride crumbled where love once stood. That evening, Mr. Caldwell returned home and found Emily sitting by the fireplace, lost in thought. He placed a folder in her lap, documents showing the bank now in her name. I don't want this, she whispered. I just wanted him to love me. Her father smiled sadly. Sometimes, my child, justice is love in disguise. You don't have to destroy him. Just show him that you were never the weak one. Weeks passed. Richard's name faded from the headlines. The mansion grew quiet. He tried to contact Emily, but she refused to see him. Until one morning, she received a letter, handwritten, trembling. It read, Emily, I have lost everything, except the memory of what you gave me. I was blinded by vanity. You were my compass, and without you, I lost my way. I don't ask for forgiveness. I only wish you peace. Emily held the letter for a long time, tears tracing her cheeks. Her heart, though scarred, still had room for grace. She didn't reply, but she sent him a small envelope containing the deed to a small cottage outside the city, one he had once dreamed of retiring in. Attached was a note. We all start again somewhere. I hope you find your peace. Richard moved there quietly, away from the world that had once bowed before him. He lived simply, humbly, a man reborn in the silence of regret. Sometimes, he would see a figure by the river, a woman in a light coat, her hair flowing in the wind, and though he never approached, he knew. She had forgiven him. Years later, Emily stood on a stage not unlike this one, sharing her story, not as a victim, but as a survivor. Her voice was calm, steady, filled with the kind of strength that only heartbreak can teach. I learned, she said to the audience, that betrayal can break your body, but not your soul. I learned that forgiveness isn't surrender, it's freedom. My father didn't avenge me. He reminded me of who I was. And I discovered that when love dies, something even stronger can take its place, self-respect. The audience was silent, moved beyond words. Somewhere in the back row sat an old man, Richard, watching her with pride and sorrow. He never approached her again, but in his eyes, there was peace, the kind that comes when you finally see the truth. Emily continued her father's work, investing in young entrepreneurs, especially women. The bank flourished under her leadership, not through greed, but through integrity. And when her father passed away, she stood by his grave and whispered, You were right, Papa. The storms do pass. That night, as the city lights shimmered on the water, Emily walked along the same park path where she once sat, broken and lost. But this time, her heart was light. She looked up at the sky and smiled. Because she had lost everything once, yet gained herself. And that, my friends, is the quiet miracle of redemption. It is not loud. It doesn't come wrapped in applause or vengeance. It comes when we choose grace over anger, dignity over despair, and peace over pride.